In custom car audio, we are constantly needing to take one of these, a wire lug, and attach it to a large gauge wire. If you're doing any sort of amplifier or electrical upgrade in the vehicle, odds are you're going to need to be able to use one of these in order to terminate a connection. Now, in order to properly crimp one of these onto a wire, you don't want to be using a sledgehammer down on the concrete. You want to be using the proper crimping tool. Now, we've reviewed this bad boy here on the channel before, and this is what I've been using for the longest time. But there is something that caught my eye the other day, and that's this tool here. How does this stack up against the hydraulic crimper? Is this a replacement for it, and how well does this crimp those wire lugs? Let's find out. We're gonna kick things off with doing a comparison on a couple of things that I noticed right away between these two different styles of crimpers. But really quick, before we do that, I do want to take a second to thank our monthly channel sponsor, New Concepts. New Concepts sells a wide variety of different power wire for our car audio build, and one of my go-to wires that I like to use for the power and ground is the Colossus Flex cable. This wire comes in several different sizes. You can see I've got 0 gauge, 4 gauge, and 8 gauge that we're going to be using for some examples here on our test crimping, and they even have a 4/0 gauge for those really beefy installs. What I love about this wire is it is oxygen-free copper, so tons of current handling capability, and it is super flexible. Even the large stuff can easily be bent around and used in a vehicle. I've been using New Concepts wire for many years, long before they were ever a sponsor of the channel, so if you guys want to learn more, check out those links down in the video description. So one of the first things I noticed right away is with the hydraulic crimpers, we definitely have a lot more available die sizes that we can use. Now, I will say that, this die size is huge. I very rarely have to crimp any lugs that are that size, but depending on the manufacturer, sometimes these lugs can be a slightly different size. Even if they're both technically a 0 gauge lug, sometimes they have a slightly different outside diameter. So I do think it is advantageous to have more dies that are slightly different sized in that case. But with that said, what I do kind of hate about these dies is the fact that there is so many. I find that I'm oftentimes having to swap these out and even try multiple different dies on one particular lug in order to find that correct size and make sure that it's actually going to do a good crimp. And that's what I'm most excited to test out on these, is with these, you open up the jaws like so, and you push down on this screw here, and then you can easily rotate these around. So I'm gonna rotate this one on the left around. Let's see, we've got a 1/0, we've got 8 gauge, 1 gauge, 2 gauge, 4 gauge, 6 gauge, and then back to 1/0. So that's 6 different sizes that we have to choose from. Obviously, when we do this, we would want to match up so that both sides have the same size lined up just like that. And these do kind of have an indent in them, so you can't set it halfway and not have it work. You have to kind of lock it into place. So let's see this bad boy in action. And a quick note for you guys, I am going to be using a couple of other specialized tools in this video. If you guys want to see my recommendations for those, I'll have those linked down in the video description as well. First of all, we want a good pair of cable cutters, of course, to cut our wire to size, which I've already done off camera because we're just doing a quick little demo. But another super cool tool to have is this. This allows us to strip large gauge wires. I actually have a full separate video about using this. To get this process started, we'll just put the lug next to the wire and kind of eyeball it. We're going to want the center of our tool lined up with where we want to start the cut. And I'm going to allow a little bit of extra wire because we can really just kind of jam it in there. And what's cool about this tool is we can put it on like so, and then we're just going to spin it around with our finger like that and pull it off. And now we can peel this insulation away. So now, you guessed it, we can just carefully feed this wire into the lug, and we're going to want to kind of twist it as we go in just to make sure that we get all of the strands inside of the lug. If you do end up with a straggler or two, it's not a huge deal. You could just use your flush cutters in order to trim away any of those little extra strands, give it kind of a haircut. So now we are ready to give this the crimp. Now, why are we down here on the floor? Well, I have found off video that you definitely want to apply a good amount of pressure with these, and it's good to have a little bit of extra force to kind of use the floor to hold one side of the handle while you pull on the other side. So let's go ahead and get the terminal inside of our crimper here. We'll kind of line it up so it's nice and even. We'll begin to apply pressure. Make sure that I'm really pushing the wire into the terminal as I kind of crimp down. We'll crimp this all the way down. Definitely takes quite a bit of force, but there you can see we've applied our first crimp. Let's go ahead and open it up and take a look. So there's our first crimp there, and it might not look like much, but this wire is definitely tight even going into the lug. So just by squeezing down that small amount, it definitely gets it on there really well. Let's give this the old pull test. It is definitely on there good, not coming off. And that's just with the one crimp. Now I do notice that the crimping jaws themselves are a bit more narrow in comparison to the actual hydraulic crimper. You can kind of see that here. You can see that it's about only half the size of what the hydraulic crimper would do. So we're definitely going to want to squeeze this down twice. So we might as well, because we have a little bit of additional surface area here that we could hit. All right, here we go. Crimp number 2. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, 2 crimps on there just to make sure that we are good and solid. So depending on how you want to look at it, potentially a little bit of a disadvantage there, the fact that those crimping jaws are a little bit more narrow. You can obviously crimp as many times as you want. And I will say that even with the hydraulic crimper here, I usually will crimp twice with this as well, just because the lugs have that extra bit of length. So there's our 0 gauge crimp, but how well does this hold up with some of the smaller wire sizes as well? We definitely want to test that out. In order to finish up this one, obviously you would apply some heat shrink tubing and just seal that up just to protect that connection and give it a finished look. Next up, we have this 4 gauge wire. I've already got it stripped, as you can see, and already inside of the lug there. Let's go ahead and push that on a little bit and we're going to try that out. I'll need to change my size here. You definitely want to make sure that it locates correctly. I found that it's a good idea to kind of close it on itself before you apply the actual lug, just to make sure that everything's good and lined up. There we go. Crimp number 1. Crimp number 2. Ugh. Now something a little bit different that I'm definitely noticing here with this style of crimper, it seems to kind of do an odd crimping shape here where it kind of pulls off to one side. I don't believe that it has anything to do with the way that I'm lining up the lug, because the lugs are perfectly, completely round. I think what's actually happening is as you go to close this, this part of the jaw tends to hit before the far part of the jaw does. And I think because of that, it ends up putting a little bit more force on one side, or kind of working the lug more to one side. I don't know if that's intentional or maybe a bit of a design flaw with these. I will say when you use the hydraulic crimper, just the way this is designed, this is a hydraulic piston that comes out and, it pushes this parallel. So both of the plates stay parallel to each other the whole time. So you got a nice even crimp. So you really don't end up with the crimp looking like this where it kind of pulls off to one side. But hey, maybe you guys have some insight. Let me know what you guys think about that. One thing for sure, I gave this the old pull test again, and it is definitely not coming off the wire. So although it looks a little bit ugly, once you put it behind the protective heat shrink, you're not going to really see that. And it's definitely going to do its purpose of applying the lug to the wire as is anyhow. Final wire size to test here, some 8 gauge wire. Go ahead and line it up against our lug and we'll strip it again. There we go. So I've of course changed the die size to our 8 gauge there, and I already did 1 crimp. Let's just move it slightly here and do another. There's our 8 gauge crimp, a lot more even and more what I'm used to getting off of the hydraulic crimper on that one. Check that out. Let me know what you guys think about that last crimp. So some of my thoughts on the comparison of this crimper versus the hydraulic crimper. I do like that this crimper, I can quickly change out the size. So if I'm doing multiple different wires that are of different sizes, it's very easy to quickly swap out that die set and crimp down as needed. Whereas on the hydraulic crimper, it definitely takes more time to pop out this pin, put it in, line it up perfect, release the pressure. It's just a lot more of a time-consuming process. The downside of this, you are limited to only those 6 sizes, whereas on this crimper, you definitely have a lot more flexibility with the different dies that they include. In my opinion, on the hydraulic crimper, you definitely get a more even crimp, whereas on these, like we were talking about, it's a little bit off to the side, but hey, it still does the job. And at the end of the day, this crimper here is typically in the $20 to $25 range, and this crimper typically varies, but it's around the $40 to $50 range. So you're looking at about half the amount for this crimper versus the hydraulic version. So there we have it, guys. If you guys want to check this out, there's a link down in the video description, and don't forget that next time you need wire for for a car audio install, definitely check out our show sponsor, New Concepts. They have a ton of different options of really good, high-quality wire. A thank you to them, along with Jerry, William, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. A big thanks to all those guys for making these videos possible. And of course, thank you guys, as always, for tuning in and watching.